Hi, I'm Erin Walker. I'm here today as the Director of Public Policy with End Exploitation, Montana. I also am the nonprofit liaison of the Yellowstone County Area Human Trafficking Task Force, and I am a volunteer co-leader of our Montana Volunteer Chapter of Operation Underground Railroad. So today I'm here to talk about the Earn It Act. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation going through the federal system, through the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives right now. So these are our objectives. We're going to talk about what the Earn It Act is, why we need it, how it provides recourse for survivors, what you can do to advocate for it, and we're going to address some criticisms about the Earn It Act. So let's lay the groundwork and talk about the problem for a little bit. In 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC for short, received more than 29.3 million cyber tip line reports containing 85 million files of child sexual abuse material. That was a 30% increase from the year previous. The New York Times has done an incredible in-depth investigation into child sexual abuse material and corporate irresponsibility. I've included the 2 links to the articles and the 2 podcasts here that I will provide with the video. But this 4-part series found an almost unfathomable increase of child pornography online, ignored by digital platforms on which it traveled. I would recommend this 4-part series to everybody. So according to federal law enforcement, many of the perpetrators who make and trade child sexual abuse material are also hands-on offenders. The economic burden of child maltreatment, child sexual abuse, and their ramifications come to a staggering $428 billion annually. So as we know, child sexual abuse material is found on the free open web. I'm not talking about the dark web right now. I'm talking about the internet that we all use. And instead of scanning and eliminating this material, many digital platforms ignore it. I'm sure if you have ever reviewed the Cyber Tip Line Report by ESP, by Electronic Service Providers, that NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, provides every year, it is very obvious that that is true, that many digital platforms are just simply ignoring it. And why is that? Well, the courts have interpreted the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, we call it CDA 230, which passed in 1996. They've interpreted that as giving tech companies legal immunity by saying that they cannot be held liable for facilitating child sexual abuse material because they aren't considered publishers under the law. If this is ringing a bell and reminding you of something, that is because we've been here before as advocates for children and to fight exploitation. You might recall that in 2018, FOSTA SESTA was passed. FOSTA SESTA was a piece of bipartisan legislation that made online companies legally responsible for facilitating sex trafficking on their platforms. So this is the legislation that shut down Backpage.com. So we're coming to the same issue here with no incentive to report and combat child sexual abuse material. Why would technology companies ever proactively step up when not doing so rewards greater profits? They're not willing to spend resources to combat online sexual exploitation of children when they don't have to. So the Earn It Act clarifies the congressional intent that big tech should not facilitate criminality on its platforms. The Earn It Act is composed of 4 core legislative provisions. 1, it makes interactive computer services liable for the child sexual abuse material on their platforms. In other words, big tech is finally going to be held responsible for their long-standing inaction as to the CSAM content they harbor and profit from. Thus, it gives child sexual abuse material survivors a path to justice and a chance to recover their privacy. 2, it creates a new online child exploitation prevention commission. Now, this commission is composed of 19 experts representing law enforcement, government agencies, academia, survivors, nonprofits, prosecutors, and technology companies. This commission will be charged with establishing best business practices for interactive computer services, that's online tech companies, to prevent, reduce, and respond to online sexual exploitation of children, including grooming and sex trafficking. The third part is it allows the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to improve the cyber tip line where child sexual abuse material is reported. And fourth, the bill replaces the term child pornography with child sexual abuse material. There's no other alteration to the criminal code in any way, but updating this language is really important because the terms child sexual abuse material more accurately reflects the type of files that we're talking about that are found on the internet. So this bill was originally introduced last session, and then it was reintroduced this session, and both times it unanimously was approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee. If you're not familiar with how bills progress through the process, I'll just let you know that last session, the time ran out. So they always have to start from the beginning and reintroduce it the next session. So that's what happened there. So there's a really interesting story behind this. Originally, the Earn It Act let tech companies earn their immunity, which, as I've said, is currently provided to them by CDA 230. So they were allowed to earn their immunity by following the best business practices developed by the commission established by this bill. So they were saying, okay, you get this blanket immunity, but you need to lift your finger a little bit and work for it, and then you can earn it. However, the senators, at this point, they were well educated on these issues as a result of the FOSTA-SESTA fight that they had in when it passed in 2018. They were astonished that big tech was fighting this very reasonable, very mild original version of the Earn It Act. The senators tried to partner and work with the tech companies to address the rampant child sexual abuse material circulating on their platforms, but the companies refused to participate in the conversation. They don't want to change. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to have to use any of their resources to police themselves and to make their platform safe for children or to fight this criminality. Instead of a well-faith effort to come to the table and work with legislators to do something about this issue, they focused on backdoor attempts to undermine all efforts. So the Senate Judiciary Committee said, we give up. You've done nothing to deserve this giant shield, and they removed the immunity. So earning it wasn't even an option with the Earn It Act. They basically said, since you refuse to engage in a public conversation about this horrific issue, then you can just go to court. And that's exactly what is going to happen for these companies to care about this issue. So this is one of those rare times when a bill came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee stronger than when it came in. All right, so 257 relevant United States organizations in this field that work in this field have signed a letter in support of the Earn It Act. This includes big names like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Of course, they were very instrumental in this bill, as well as the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Rebecca Bender Initiatives, International Justice Mission, RAIN, World Without Exploitation. There's a whole bunch, and that's just a few of the big names that have signed in support. Also, here in Montana, we have a lot of support for this bill. A lot of area task forces have signed, our service providers. We just have a lot of support in our area. But our two senators and our representative have not co-sponsored it yet. So that is our big ask. That is what we need to do, is to get our Senator Gaines, Senator Tester, and Representative Rosendale to co-sponsor this important legislation. This is NCMEC made a 5-page fact sheet that is available at this link right here, and they've also written a letter of support here that are both very good resources. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about how the Earn It Act provides recourse for survivors. As you know, child sexual abuse material is documentation of crime, and not only of that crime that happened, but also it's considered a crime in perpetuity. So survivors who have their sexual abuse memorialized online when it's endlessly replayed and circulated are constantly being re-victimized. In essence, there is no end to their trauma because it is continual, and it's very difficult for them to move through the stages of recovery. Okay, so I'd like to go through 2 case studies to try to bring this home a little bit. These are 2 lawsuits happening right now with 2 survivors of CSAM. Many lawsuits, most of the time they are dismissed on grounds of the immunity provided by CDA 230. So it's very unusual for lawsuits to be able to progress, which is why we're talking about how important it is for these victims to be able to have a recourse when they are victimized by this type of crime. So first case study is Rose Kalemba. She was sex trafficked from age 11. At age 15, her child sexual abuse videos were uploaded to Pornhub. She pleaded daily for 6 months for them to get taken down, but was ignored. The videos were not taken down until she was almost 16, and after garnering over 2 million views on all 6 videos on Pornhub, the platform had no incentive to address the child sexual abuse material. The internet memorialized her abuse and trauma. All right, the second case study I'll share is John Doe 1 and John Doe 2. These minors had their child sexual abuse material on Twitter, but Twitter refused to remove it when these survivors filed complaints. Twitter requested that they jump through hoops to verify themselves, and finally replied that the video in question did not in fact violate any of their policies. Twitter continued to promote and profit from the sexual abuse of the minors, which resulted in these videos of child sexual abuse material to accumulate over 167,000 views before law enforcement finally forced Twitter to remove it. The burden should not be on the victim to get their content taken down. Currently, survivors have no recourse when their pleadings go unanswered because tech companies are not liable and they have no real incentive to combat this crime. Tech companies have a responsibility to create service products with the best interests of children and teenagers as a primary design consideration, but obviously this is not happening. So law enforcement and victim services can work around the clock, rescuing, prosecuting, and treating survivors. But if we don't get the exploitation under control on the internet, then we are running in circles. The Earn It Act can make a real lasting impact. By making these companies liable, the Earn It Act empowers victims of child sexual abuse material by giving them a path to justice and the possibility of restoring privacy lost as their rape, assault, and sexual abuse is endlessly disseminated online. So now let's talk about what you can do to advocate for the Earn It Act. These 4 national organizations have created websites that are action centers where they already have the message prepared, and you just fill in your name and address and you send it to your delegates on the Hill. And so this one is International Justice Mission, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, Shared Hope International, Operation Underground Railroad. That would be a great thing for anybody to do. Do all 4 of them and send those letters to your delegates. You can also email your senators and representatives. Just Google how to contact senator and then put in the senator that is over your state or your representative. And you can easily find how to contact them through their websites. This is an example of an email that you could write, but I would suggest that you make it personal. Add some personal details to why you're particularly concerned about this and why you want them to co-sponsor the Earn It Act. You can also call the Washington, D.C. offices and the local district offices and leave messages with the receptionist. So let's address some of the criticisms that surround the Earn It Act that are being brought up by some of these enormous tech corporations. So first of all, when you're talking to your senators or representatives' offices, warn them that they cannot get nonpartisan information from a Google search, since Google is working against the bill and suppressing honest information. Despite what big tech's legion of lobbyists will tell them, Earn It Act does not undermine privacy initiatives or free speech or human rights. But since big tech can't defend child sexual abuse material, it invents misleading arguments against this bill. So big tech is using arguments steeped in technical talk as a strategy to intimidate and silence survivors and advocates. These are not good faith arguments, but they are effective because they distract and intimidate people that are advocates and that are in this field from fighting to pass it because they don't understand all this tech talk. So we're going to break this down a little bit. Most of the arguments that these tech corporations bring up in their articles are encryption, that it will weaken encryption, or that it will create a backdoor to your data for law enforcement, or that it will infringe on user privacy, that it will have unintended consequences, and that it will destroy the internet as we know it. Okay, so encryption. There is nothing in this bill that will weaken encryption. In fact, the bill creates a specific carve-out in the actual bill text stating that encryption in and of itself will not cause a tech platform to be held liable for CSAM. In other words, encryption is not a guilty verdict or a get out of jail free card for these companies. The encryption that we use today will remain the same. Encryption is vital to a safe and secure internet. All right, so civil liberties. This bill does not change the civil liberties of any American. Your data will continue to be protected as it is today from unlawful access. Your text messages and phone calls can only be read through a lawful subpoena or warrant granted by a judge or grand jury. There is no change to the burden of proof. There is no provision that makes these court orders easier to acquire for child sexual abuse material than it would any other type of crime. There is no alteration to the criminal code in any way beyond updating the language from child pornography to child sexual abuse material. The only access law enforcement should have to a citizen's private data is that granted by the judiciary when all other investigative avenues have been exhausted. This bill does not change how law enforcement pursues investigations in any way. So when these tech lobbyists and corporations say that it will create a backdoor to your data for law enforcement, that is patently untrue. This bill does not infringe on user privacy. The tools that companies use to scan for child sexual abuse material are similar to how they scan for malware and spyware. For example, photo DNA, which is a technology used to scan for CSAM, it does not scan the actual photos, but it compares the hash. That's the unique digital fingerprint. It compares that hash of a photo to a list of child sexual abuse image hashes. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has a whole database of identified files that are child sexual abuse material, and each of those have a hash. So photo DNA is technology that compares the hashes on the internet to what is already identified and known to be child sexual abuse material. So these technologies only detect hashes that are associated with known child sexual abuse material. Communications and free speech are not hindered, as legal content isn't detected by this tech. These existing processes are what help to secure platforms and protect privacy. The Earn It Act not only protects your privacy, but will incentivize companies to protect children's privacy, especially victims of child sexual abuse material whose abusive images are being distributed across the internet right at this moment. Unintended consequences. A lot of the same well-worn but fully unsubstantiated characterizations that we saw with FOSTA SESTA are now reappearing around this bill. As we know, that passed in 2018 and the internet was not broken. So conspicuously absent from these declarations are the predicate. What specifically these unintended consequences are. Further, they go on to suggest that the luxurious immunity big tech currently enjoys is working pretty well. NCMEC reported 85 million files of child sexual abuse material in 2021. That was a 30% increase from the previous year. And previous years from that have also seen enormous growth in child exploitation. We're talking so much growth, and they're suggesting that that is working well. Disproportionate attention is being paid to what might happen rather than what is happening right now. Existential. So implicit in the existential argument against the Earn It Act is that everything on the internet is sunshine and rainbows. What about, we know there are so many problems on the internet today. We've got white supremacy, jihadi propaganda, incels, revenge porn, identity theft, gift card scams, foreign election interference, domestic conspiracy theories, cyberbullying are just a few of the problems that are industrialized by these social media platforms. What this bill does is start the process with the most pressing, the most obvious, and most unambiguously evil of these issues, the sexual exploitation of our kids. The establishment of a diverse commission of industry, government, law enforcement, and experts working together to make the internet better, to codify a set of best practices that we can all agree on, is sorely overdue and will restore a regulatory balance that can produce innovation without shirking responsibility. All right, so these are 4 documents that have been prepared to provide more information regarding the myths being propagated about the Earn It Act. These documents share myths and facts, frequently asked questions. They're very well written, and I would encourage everybody to look at those if you want more information. So that is the Earn It Act. I hope all of you have a better understanding of why this legislation is so incredibly vital in our fight against exploitation of children online. I hope that you all are motivated to contact your legislators and tell them that you care about this issue and that you want them to co-sponsor this bill. It is worth all of our time and efforts and our advocacy to get this to pass. Thank you so much for joining me today to learn about the Earn It Act.